Good morning, members, officers and any members of the public viewing the live stream of this meeting. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. My name is Councillor Michael Atkins and I'm the chair of this committee. My vice chair is Councillor Peter Sanford, and I'll introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. If you're in the chamber, you're reminded the meeting is being live streamed. If you're joining us remotely, please ensure your camera and microphone remain off until you're addressing the committee. And if you're present in the room, please make sure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. First item on the agenda today is apologies for absence. Ian, do we have any apologies for absence today?
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I've been informed that Councillor Heather Williams is running a few minutes late. Councillor John Williams, who sometimes observes, has sent his apologies for today. Second item is declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare in relation to any item of business on this agenda? Thank you, Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. I'd like to remind the committee that I'm a board member of the South Cambridge Investment Partnership, otherwise known as SCIP. Also, South Cambridge Project SCIP does get a mention. I'm not sure about SCP, but just to make you aware.
Thank you, Councillor Stobart, and Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Chair. Just my usual declaration as a non-remunerated director of South Cambs Limited, trading as Omen Street Housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting, which were provided as part of the agenda. Do members have any suggested amendments relating to the accuracy of the minutes for the meeting held on the 26th of September 2024? Any amendments people want to put forward? Thank you. I'd like to move approval of these minutes as a true and accurate record. Can I have a seconder? Any objections? Thank you. I will sign those after the meeting. Item 4 is public questions. We've had no questions received from members of the public. So we move to item 5, which is our first substantive item. This is the Ernst & Young completion report for those charged with governance years ending 31st of March 2022 and 2023. I understand we are joined by Mr. Russell and Ms. Dawson from Ernst & Young, and we may also come to Mr. Madagascar, Head of Finance, in due course, but I think we'll start with our external auditors. Please present the report. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee. Can you hear me clearly? Yes? Okay, good. And apologies, I'm working from one screen, so I won't be able to see expressions in the room while I'm presenting the report, but let me take you to the report and just explain the purpose of it and its structure. So as you'll be aware, through many debates that we've had at the Audit Committee, legislation was proposed by MHCLG to introduce a backstop date for all of the delayed accounts and audit opinions across the local government system. That legislation came into effect on the 30th of September. You're probably also aware from our previous conversations that we are guided by the National Audit Office Code of Audit Practice, which sets out the interpretation for auditors of the auditing legislation, and that code was updated and came into effect from the 14th of November. Basically, what that allows us and the authority to do is to publish accounts that are delayed and issue a disclaimed opinion on any of those open years of accounts, but it must be done by next Friday, the 13th of December. So this report sets out the minimum requirements in order to deliver that disclaimed opinion for the open years. And it sets out in page 2 the planning work that we're required to do to assess the risks, to update our understanding of the organisation, and to set a level of materiality to which we would form our views. It then sets out in section 3 the findings, the results and findings of the work that we have done. And you'll be aware that we had already completed our full responsibilities in relation to the value for money arrangements. So you'll see that the information that we reported to you in the past we've identified one weakness within the governance arrangements, which is actually associated with the difficulty that the organisation has had in publishing its accounts within the timeframe set within those regulations, really as a result up to 22-23 of some issues within the finance team in terms of having the capacity really to catch up with the delayed accounts. And you'll note that we've also identified one or two differences through our review of the 21-22 draft financial statements. There were no points to raise on the 22-23 draft financial statements. But I think the point of most interest to the committee is the form of words within the disclaimed audit opinion. And you'll see on page 20 for 21-22 and on page 23 for year 22-23, the form of words that we'll use within our disclaimed audit opinion. So for 21-22, you'll note that we set out the delay to the prior year audit of 2021 and the lack of publication of the draft 21-22 accounts until December 23, and that combined with the backstop date and the wider requirements of local audit reset system means that we didn't have the resources available to complete the detailed audit procedures to avoid a disclaimed audit opinion. And on page 23, you'll see that we refer again to the circumstances relating to the 22-23 audit. So my proposal is I would stop there at this point and take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions specifically about the form of words around the disclaimed opinion or anything else that Mr. Dawson's mentioned? Councillor Howell.
Chairman, forgive me, my computer has decided to do an update, so I haven't got everything in front of me, so I'm working off my phone. I do apologise. I don't think this question is actually for Ms. Dawson, and I think it's a more general question for us all. I'm looking at page 25. Do I take it we've got to page 25 yet? Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And it's there with regards to value for money. Under the, it says, I have identified as one significant weakness in the following area. The governance, how the council ensures that it makes informed decisions and properly manages risks. So I want to know, and again, it's a great shame that Councillor John Williams is not here, and I know he attends nearly all of these, so it's a great shame. Are we now sure that that has now been addressed over that time period, and that we are actually making informed decisions and properly managing its risks? I think that's a very general one. I'm not expecting anybody, I don't think anyone here can actually answer that.
No, thank you, Councillor Howell. My understanding is that that specific risk, or sorry, that specific weakness is the continued delay to the publishing of audits and audit opinions. But perhaps, Ms. Dawson, you could just kind of clarify that.
Yes, that is correct. So that is the overarching headline, Councillor, in terms of the criteria against which we need to assess the arrangements. So it is unfortunate that we use that headline and it looks very broad, but actually it specifically relates to the delay, as the Chair has explained. And one of your forms of assurance will be to look at what your current auditors say about your arrangements for 23-24 and then on into 24-25, and that will be how you get an up-to-date assessment of the same nature of the same issue.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman, as I say, I'm working off a phone, so I do apologise for that, but yeah, thank you very much.
No problem at all. Are there any further questions? Councillor Stobart, thank you.
So Chair, if I could ask a somewhat technical question, I'll try and summarise it as well as I can. But in a disclaimed audit report, what they're saying is that there are, in fact, details that there hasn't been the opportunity to investigate because of time and resources. We've been through all of this. But what is the result? A simple way of thinking would suggest that the variance that we would normally associate with the accounts is actually potentially slightly bigger because we haven't pinned everything down. Now, we're not in the area of physics here. This is accounts, but Would that be a fair thing to say? In other words, there is a degree of variance which is potentially, and I'll use that word, potentially larger than we would expect from a fully audited set of accounts. And I will come back later to the question of, do we then, following through or getting back into the normal audit trail, actually diminish that variance? That would be our goal. But you know, it would be nice to have an accounting input to that question. So is that kind of simple summary that I've put forward appropriate for us to get our heads around where we're at with these two reports?
Thank you, Councillor Stowe, but I think that's probably a reasonable interpretation of what we're looking at. I mean, I have every confidence that our finance team have obviously done their best to draw up these accounts to the best of their ability, and indeed, in previous years where there have been full audits, there have not been a very large number of corrections, and most of those have not been of any particularly sizable ones, I would say. I would say that the biggest risk would be the greatest value of timely audited accounts, I would say, is the reliance that our partners and our suppliers and our customers can place on them, that this is an organisation that is well run, has resources available, can be extended credit, or can be kind of you can trust to kind of enter into kind of long run contracts, etc. Certainly, if we were, say, a private company or something, that those would be the main value. That would be the main benefit of having a fully audited, up to date kind of set of accounts. So we are losing some of that value. Well, indeed, we have lost that by not having up to date accounts in any case. So I think this process of disclaiming so that we can get, ultimately through Mr. Cardozo of KPMG and his team, so that hopefully within the next kind of 6 months or so, we can have, an up-to-date audited set of accounts for a reasonably recent time period. I think we will then get back most of that value in terms of how we appear to the kind of wider public and those other organisations that we're party to. So that would be how I look at it. But perhaps, Ms. Dawson, do you think are there some other aspects of this that we should be considering?
No, I think that's entirely correct, and I think you're right to then look at where the how long this will take to wash through in terms of getting to a clean set of accounts. And I know that Andy Cardozo's team will be looking at that. The guidance has been produced by the FRC, so Financial Reporting Council, which regulates us as auditors, and also KPMG, about how long they anticipate that to take to get to a clean set of accounts, and where they, at a high level, they expect auditors to focus to be able to move to clean opinions. So I will leave that to Andy and not steal his thunder.
Thank you. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to ask, please, you've drawn our attention to the wording of this disclaimer. Could I check that this is a sort of broadly standard type of text that's come into this report, which would appear in similar reports for other organisations who have missed their accounting deadlines over the years? Is this a sort of standard thing? I understand the significance of it, but I'm sure we're not the only late public sector body to have received something along these lines. Thank you.
You're entirely correct, Councillor Leeming. So we are guided by the FRC in terms of the structure of the audit opinion, and it is the reason I highlighted it for members is because it's sensitive for you to understand how we've reflected that. So I just wanted you to be fully cited on how we've done that, but it is following FRC guidelines. They are very clear that they want us to include the circumstances for the organisation within the overall structure of a standard opinion. And to your point about you're not the only council, there are over 400, I think actually the number is over 450 disclaimed opinions that are expected by the end of next week across England. So you're by no means the only one.
Thank you very much for putting that into context. I have a question for further on in your report, but I wasn't sure whether you sort of stopped at this point, and I wondered whether you were going to say any more, or whether I should ask the question now.
Ask the question. Yep, that's fine.
Thank you. So on page 48 of our agenda, or page 40 of your report, which is in Appendix B, I wanted to check where things were up to with the fees. So there's a standard fee, and then there's a little note 1 which says to be confirmed. Would you be able to indicate when that would be confirmed and when we would be hearing about that, please?
Very fair question. The PSAA is responsible for determining all audit fees. The issues associated with disclaimed opinions are ones that we understand they are grappling with. We don't know, and it would probably be wrong for me to speculate quite how they're going to determine the fee for disclaimed audit opinion work and when they're going to do that. So my recommendation in other audit committees is actually, as an organisation, potentially you should go and ask PSAA that yourself. We are asking them, you know, on a weekly basis. But I can't tell you the answer to that, I'm afraid. Only they can tell you the answer to that, and so you might want to ask them directly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to pick up on that line of questions and in your response and in the kind of discussion that followed. We talked about the role of KPMG as next auditor to, in a sense, help to bring things under control. Now, is that flow of information, in other words, what would have been done now if we'd had the time, are we sure that's happening, you know, in the communication between the two audit teams and the finance department here, that we kind of make that process as timely as we can and as accurate as we can? So flows of information, one audit team to the next, and, you know, including the colleagues in finance.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could comment on that, Ms. Dawson, I think we'll ask Mr. Cardoza as well later on, but from your perspective,
Yeah.
the kind of handover.
Yes, so the first thing to note is that we're all working within the same framework. So Andy has access to exactly the same information from the various regulators as I do, and has the same responsibilities for you in 23-24 as I have had in 22-23. So we're all working to the same standard, the same expectations around information and reporting responsibilities. Next thing to say is that clearly, as soon as we have issued our disclaimed opinions for 21-22 and 22-23, we as the, you know, extant auditors are out of the way and are free then to be able to provide Andy with any information he would like on our previous audits. They need to be signed off before he can access our information. But clearly, there's 2 years there where we've done very limited procedures. So following the guidance that, you know, I've talked about from the FRC, my expectation would be that Andy will ask us whatever he'd like to know. We will be able to provide that information. And then, you know, he's building back the audit assurance that he has from a position of no assurance over the opening balances for 23-24. Clearly, we've already met. We had various briefing discussions in the run up to this timeline. So really, from my perspective, I think that's working well. But clearly, Andy needs to be free to comment.
Thank you. Yes, we'll pick that up later in the agenda. Councillor Stobart.
Yeah, Janet and Chair, sorry, through you, Chair. Janet, thank you very much. I'm just wondering if there are any milestones that we should be regarding in, you know, reflecting on the process that we've just discussed. Are there any special milestones that that need to feature in the audit process? Just as a, you know, perhaps an extra, layer of control or attention, if you will.
Yes, I mean, I think we need to be careful. You know, we're hopefully going to get to this 13th of December backstop and then be sort of done with those. But equally, I guess it's important that we don't lose the kind of knowledge and expertise that Ernst & Young have is not kind of completely kind of lost at that point. Is there anything more you want to say just about kind of perhaps say the next kind of month and a half and how we can all work together best to ensure that doesn't happen?
From our perspective, we are, available, willing to work with KPMG and with Peter and the team. Once we've provided these opinions, so our January is looking a lot quieter. I'm more than happy to be able to support if required.
Thank you. I have two questions briefly, if I may, and then I may just bring in Mr. Maddock after that. I just wanted to pick up in your audit risks and area of focuses. So this is your page 12, our page 20. You highlight a new risk for 21-22, which is the completeness of group accounts, and this is about, as I understand it, this is the kind of the boundary of what sort of constitutes the kind of the council and all its subsidiaries. Could you say anything more about this acquisition of Cambourne Business Park and the possible implications for how that? Because there seems to be some, because I think in your details of it, it seems to be not completely clear-cut whether it should or shouldn't be included in the accounts in your view, and I just wonder if perhaps you or Mr. Russell might want to expand on that.
So this was brought to our attention through the planning procedures that we carried out for 21-22. So confirmation from management that there was a new subsidiary that needed to be considered for group accounts. And so on that basis, we've identified that as a new area of risk that, as management is saying, they need to consider it for 21-22, and therefore so do we. Beyond that, I can't say anything more because clearly we're disclaiming the opinion. So I haven't done further work in that area.
Thank you. Just from a theoretical perspective, though, what is the kind of the key criteria? Is it the materiality of the investment
Yes.
that would determine? Okay, so
yes,
whether the value of it is sufficiently high that it should be, or whether it can.
it should be consolidated. Exactly that. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. Mr. Maddock, did you want to comment on that point specifically? Because I think.
Yes. So we took the view that it wasn't material, and given that we'd completed the accounts, we felt it didn't warrant putting it in. Quite clearly for 23-24, it will be in, and obviously there's been some contact between myself, EY, and indeed KPMG over the issue, just to make sure everybody's clear what's in and what's out.
Thank you. Maybe we can pick that up a bit later in the meeting then, just to check that we're all kind of understanding exactly what's happening there. That would be good. My final question, sorry to return to the fees. Yes, apologies, Councillor Heather Williams. We have already discussed the audit fees and how it is still in the hands of the PSAA as to what the fees will ultimately be. This may be an unreasonable request, but presumably Ernst & Young has a track of the time and materials spent on these two audits, and that might reasonably be an upper bound, or at least close to an upper bound, of what the PSAA will allow to ultimately go as ahead as a charge. Are those figures that you could perhaps provide to myself and Mr. Maddock in confidence, just so that we have a sense of the scale of the work that's been undertaken, and so we can kind of roughly benchmark what we might need to kind of provide for in our kind of business planning? Is that an unreasonable request?
It's not an unreasonable request. I'm smiling wryly because I have no clue, unfortunately, what PSAA are going to do with the data that we have provided them. So whilst I can give you that indication, I don't know what rates they're going to apply, and I don't know how they are going to assess the extent of work done. So it would be a number which you may or may not find relates to the ultimate number. And whilst I realise that's highly unsatisfactory from your perspective, it's also highly unsatisfactory from ours, and leaves us with a commercial risk. So let me consult internally on that, Chair, because I would be loath to provide you with something that was misleading or over which I have no control.
No, I do fully appreciate that neither you or I are the decision makers when it comes to this, but equally, I think if it sounds like perhaps you have already provided such information to the PSAA already, and it might be, so I think it would be helpful for us just to kind of have sight of that, obviously on a kind of confidential, not in kind of open session basis, just so that we have a kind of a sense of this. I think it would just be helpful for me to know the sense of the scale of the work, because I think it's quite hard to tell from this report exactly kind of how much time and at what levels of seniority have been required to bring this together. It's obviously very different to a normal audit. So I think having some sense of the scale of it would be really helpful if we can have that. But I appreciate your disclaimers that the number that ends up coming may be completely different from that, but just some sense of it. Mr. Maddox, sorry, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just very briefly, I share Janet's frustration, and we did speak about this a few weeks ago, and I did actually write to the PSAA to see where we were with it. I haven't had a response, but I suspect they've got 400 other emails asking similar questions. So, yeah, a bit unfortunate and not very satisfactory, but we are where we are, I guess.
Yes, thank you. Are there any further comments on this report? Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and also just do declaration of interest in relation to the Great Cambridge Partnership. Apologies for being late. Just on page 38, when it says it identifies one significant weakness, it says about a cabinet and committee system. Obviously, we have a cabinet system. We do have committees as well. Whereas, so normally, if you would think of a committee system, you'd think of things like the City Council, I think the County Council. So whether actually that needs clarifying in the report, that we are a cabinet system here. I know things like planning and even licensing comes up with the exceptional planning applications. Most committees can't make decisions. It still has to go through cabinet or full council. So that bit wasn't clear. And also through this section, what I couldn't quite see was how we would get over that weakness, or is it just a case of because there's elected members and it's got a weakness in that sense in relation to the report? It wasn't quite clear to me what could be done differently to achieve it, other than stop having councillors, which I don't think Turkey's ready to vote for Christmas on that one just yet.
Thank you. We discussed this briefly. The significant weaknesses specifically around the delayed to audited opinions and audited accounts, and not with regards to the weakness has to be described at the top level. So you can only, there are only these three headings, and so the weakness gets applied to the kind of whole section. But the specificity of it is the delayed accounts and the delayed audits, rather than the kind of the makeup of the council and how we operate.
So, Chair, thank you for that response. But also, I think it should be made clear that we are a cabinet system and not a committee system, rather than a cabinet and committee system, as this is a draft report.
Yes, I do agree that is a little confusing at the moment. Have we understood correctly what you meant by that, Ms. Dawson?
Yes, I mean, I think we've looked across the organisation's arrangements and identify cabinets, the cabinet system, and that you operate committees. It may just be that the wording could be slightly improved to be specific about that. But I think it was meant to be read as a general statement of the arrangements in place, as opposed to drawing out the detailed, specific nature that Councillor Williams has identified.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments on this report? Sorry, Mr. Murphy.
Good morning, everyone. Apologies for the cat. I've been invaded at the moment. Yes, I just want to echo the comments from Councillor Heather Williams, and as Janet's just mentioned, we do operate an executive style here. So the reference to committee, as Councillor Heather Williams has highlighted, as long as it's referred to in the correct way, that would help being specific. Other places do have committee systems. We have an executive system, but Janet's already indicated she's aware of that. So I just wanted to echo, everyone make good points there.
Thank you. I now realise there have not been enough feline contributions at previous committee meetings, so thank you, Mr Murphy, for supplying such. Councillor Williams.
Sorry, Chair, there is also one typo through the report where it doesn't have all the figures and the dates of the years. So if we could make sure that all the years are correctly dated.
Thank you. Okay, so we have been asked to note the report, which we have done so. So I will now move us on. Thank you very much to Ms Dawson and Mr Russell for attending. I'll now move us on then to item 6, which is the updated annual governance statements for 21-22 and 22-23. The committee may recall that we looked at these when we first approved the draft accounts for those 2 relevant years. However, my understanding is that the AGS has to be up to date as at the point at which the accounts are signed, which is going to be this week and or next week, which is why it has come back to us again. Mr Tully, could you please present the report?
Good morning, members of the committee, and thank you, Chair. We're starting off on page 59 of your packs, and just to confirm that the Chair's explanation there is absolutely correct. So if you have a sense of deja vu, I apologise. We did approve these, specifically the 21-2022 in January this year, and the 22-23 in May of this year. Any material sort of governance changes or events which happen after the financial year and up to the reporting date for the conclusion of the statement of accounts should be reflected in the annual governance statement as good practice. So examples we've got of that in our existing statement is that we've referred to things like the best value notice and the impact of significant global events where it impacts upon our governance arrangements. This has been actually our approach since 2019-2020. And when we've reported this previously to the committee, we've recognised there may be needs to make small updates. In February 2024, for the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, who set the guidance for these documents, issued a bulletin reflecting, of course, the impacts of the audit delays we've spoken about earlier, and how that impacts the publication of the annual governance statement. It provided a bit of clarity upon reporting governance matters, and really it complemented our sort of existing approach that we've taken. So really this is just a matter for keeping the documents up to date as much as possible. Now for completeness, and I apologise, it's added more pages to an existing already long agenda, we've added both versions of the AGS to the reports. We've used track changes of that so you can see all the updates. But for ease, on page 62 of your packs, you'll see a table where I've included a summary of the changes plus the revised wording. There's really 3 things there. First of all, it's reflecting the delay to the audits and of the statement of accounts. Because we reflected the best value notice in the document already, we've updated position there because that's changed. And then thirdly, it's really just the introductory text to explain that we've made these changes. So in summary, what we're asking the committee to do, just really for simplicity, because we are dealing with multiple statement accounts as well, it could get quite confusing, is really just to ask you to really sort of like note the changes and approve the revised versions of both of those annual governance statements in advance of the statement of accounts, which are coming up next on the agenda. And really that's all I have to say, but I hope the track changes and the summary makes it easy for you to follow. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. I did appreciate the structure of this report. I thought that was very clear, and I was able to follow through those changes into the track changes as you outlined. So thank you for that. Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you very much. The track changes is something that we asked for some time ago. It's great to see that implemented. And I think what's quite clear from the edits and areas in red that there isn't much at all that's changed since the last time we saw this. I think the things that are in there are factual based, not opinion based, and I'm happy to proceed with this.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions on these updated documents? Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I also support the very visible track changes. I'm just wondering, is there a version where those are true track changes in the sense of when was that text introduced and you know, who was responsible, if that's a requirement, but certainly in the structure of the document it should be evident where the changes came from and what dates were assigned to those changes.
Yes, thank you. Are you operating a kind of change log or some such for this document?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. One of the benefits, we're using Microsoft Word online now, and that keeps a full history of all the track changes. You can go back to previous versions, or you can view the track changes. It's very easy to look at that. So we haven't kept a table log of when it was changes, because we can just go back to whatever version or iteration that we want. But yeah, we've got a full history of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a question from me, Mr. Day. Looking ahead a little, because I think we will fairly shortly will need to consider the annual governance statement for the year just finished. I say just finished, the 2023-24 kind of financial year. Are you anticipating any kind of significant sort of changes to that statement? Is there anything kind of happening now or on the horizon that you think will need to be reflected in the AGS when we next see it?
Thank you. At this stage, no. We probably want to reflect the changes we've made in this one. But nothing in addition to that at this stage.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions on these two annual governance statements? Fantastic. So just to be clear, we're being asked to approve the updated annual governance statement for 2021-22 and the updated annual governance statement for 2022-23 before we then look at the accounts in the next item. Can we approve those by affirmation? Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 7. So these are the two sets of accounts for the 2 years that we're looking at, 21-22 and 22-23. Mr. Maddock, could you please present this report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we're obviously in a similar position with the accounts as we are with the annual governance statements. So the draft accounts were approved on the 23rd of January 24 and the 22-23 on the 16th of May 24. There haven't been any changes made to these accounts, so we just need to go through a process to adopt these as the final version of the accounts so that we can meet the backstop date of the 13th of December, which is just over a week away. I wasn't proposing to go through the accounts particularly, but it's just really a case of just noting that we have to go through this process to make sure that we carry out all of the procedures we need to make sure that we meet the backstop date and do everything we need to do ahead of that. So that's all it is really.
Thank you. I might just invite you to comment, Mr. Maddock, because I think in Ernst & Young's report, as I recall, so in addition to that potential risk around the business park, which we've already discussed, I think they noted one or two other very minor, perhaps wording issues or numbers that didn't tally from one year to the next. Have we reflected those in this version of the accounts, or are we content that they're sufficiently immaterial at this point that we just want to proceed with the accounts as they are?
So we haven't reflected those, and on the basis of their immaterial, we decided just to proceed as they are. And as I say, as we said earlier, as the years progress, we'll gradually build back the assurance we need. So I think that's probably where we are at the moment.
Thank you. That seems very sensible. Are there any further questions or comments on the final accounts 21-22 and 22-23? Fantastic. So we're being asked to approve the final version of accounts for 21. Oh, my apologies. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to check that sufficient clarification around expenses is covered. I appreciate that the expenses were very low most likely because of COVID, just to make sure we feel we're sufficiently, there's some references, but it looks like a very big step. And actually, when we look at the next year, it's a big step, and that wasn't when we had lockdown. So I think some more explanation around the expenses would be potentially helpful, unless you feel that's sufficiently covered, because it looks like such a great big leap. I'm thinking for public transparency that, you know, councillors haven't all of a sudden just gone on a lot of jollies. It's because we weren't going to and from, and offices indeed. There is quite significant increases across there.
I mean, I guess the values we're talking about would fall under our materiality level, so I doubt that we'd necessarily want to.
They're not material differences. We're talking a few £1,000s, but I just think from a transparency point of view, I'm not saying all residents will read the accounts, but if a resident was to, it's clear that there hasn't been a change in the rules. It's just because it's quite easy to forget what years were locked down, what years we were hybrid, and those sorts of things.
Thank you. Perhaps that's something, I'm slightly reluctant to add amendments to these accounts, but perhaps when we get the final 23-24 accounts, we could just include some narrative about how, that the expenses policy has been consistent over the last few years.
Or a cover note when we publish it on the website, so it doesn't have to be in the accounts itself. I just think there should be something that makes it really clear why the expenses have changed, because that's an area of quite rightly, particular public scrutiny.
What are your thoughts, Mr. Maddock?
So we do have a note in relation to members' expenses. So actually we can, so we do have a note 25. We talk about members' allowances and expenses there, so we could probably include something there just to clarify that. Because actually, although the figure's not material, you can see, as you say, quite a big increase. And whilst the reasons for that we know about, we can probably include something in there, even if it's just a quick sentence, just to make that clear. Okay.
Thank you. I suppose sort of falling in that kind of material by nature rather than by kind of quantum category of things. Thank you. So subject to that amendment in the accounts, are there any further comments or questions? I'm not seeing any. So the committee is asked to approve the final version of the accounts for 21-22 and 22-23, produced in Appendix A and B respectively in our agenda. Can we agree by affirmation to approve those accounts? Agreed. Thank you very much. So that's quite a lot of work on those two sets of accounts. The next item here is the governance risk and control update. But I understand that we are also joined by Mr. Cardoza has joined, and I wonder if this might actually be an appropriate opportunity while we're still in this kind of world and mindset, whether at this point we should perhaps receive an update on the ongoing 23-24 audit, which is underway at the moment. Mr. Cardoza, is that convenient for you? Does the committee mind to take that at this point?
Works for me, Chair, yeah.
Yeah, take it away, thank you.
Yeah, and apologies, I couldn't be with you in person this time. Just a clash in the diary with a lot of other audit committees happening today as well across my local government clients. That said, and again, just picking up on Janet's comments from EY, yes, we've worked well with EY up to now, and once they have signed your 22-23, as Janet said, we will then be able to have access to their files. And again, if there was anything that we needed to pick up for 23-24, we could do that. But we've had conversations with EY all the way through, so it's not been a massive hindrance or anything like that. So it's been useful to be able to have that dialogue with them. From our point of view, we've made good progress on 23-24. We've worked hard, obviously working with Peter Fazana and James from your accounting team. We've also been on site, which has worked really well. So my team has been on site now for about a month, a couple of days a week. And I came down last week for a couple of days as well. And again, it's useful to have that face-to-face interaction so you can clear off review points much more quickly and efficiently, And whilst we have made good progress, and again, take you through some of that progress in a minute, there is still work to be done. There is still quite a lot of work to be done. And I don't think we're going to get all of it done, but we're working hard to get as much of it done as possible. Given the fact that you have a disclaimed opinion on 22-23, I think I've explained before that 23-24, our opinion will also be disclaimed because the brought forward balances are not being audited. That would take us redoing the 22-23, and nobody wants us to do that. The 20, and then thinking about the questions that were asked about how do you build back that assurance and how long does that take? So 23-24 will be disclaimed, 24-25 will be disclaimed because the comparators that come from 23-24 will be unaudited because they're the brought forwards from the previous. And again, in taking the final step, 25-26 will be the first year that you could have a clean opinion. And I say could because obviously I'm an auditor, and there's always going to be the caveat that your accounts have to be correct for you to have a clean opinion. But that's the first time that you could have a clean opinion. There is still work that is being done across government, the NAO, and the FRC in terms of reserves and reserve balances. And what do we do on that? Nobody has quite got to the bottom of that in terms of how do we get assurance if the previous year's audits have been disclaimed. How do you get the comfort on the reserves balance? But that's a technical point that's being picked up. So just to take you through where we are currently with the audit. So the biggest issue that we've had, which we've talked through with Peter and Vazana and James, has been matching through between the transactions that are on your general ledger back to the trial balance, back to the accounts. And we've done a lot of work, and we're still doing lots of work on that. We're still in conversations with Vazana and Peter in going through how certain manual journals have been put through on the accounts. And unless we can get to a conclusion on that, then that may have to be stated as errors on the accounts. But we're still working with the team on that. A lot of work has gone through, and we've just got a small amount of work left to do on payroll, treasury and debt, collection fund income and provisions. So all of that you've got comfort on in terms of the accounts and what they are showing. And again, payroll, huge part of your expenditure. We've been able to more or less finish our work on that and give assurance on that, which is we will be able to give assurance on it, which should be good news to you as a committee. Other work that has quite a bit of work still left to do is a non-collection fund income, grants, expenditure, investments and pensions. We're working hard on journals, and again, there's still a lot of work in terms of the evidence that we're waiting for from the team. On PPE, one of the main accountants has been off on sick leave, having an operation, etc. So we're waiting for their return on Monday, and hopefully we'll be able to pick up a lot of work with her, and her dedicated time has been guaranteed by Fazana and Peter in terms of responding to our queries. Again, we will work and continue to work, and we've got resources booked in between now and the middle of Jan to work on PPE and get as much comfort as we can in terms of that balance. The other area is creditors and accruals, and again, we're working on that, and we've been working on that, and there's quite large samples of testing that we have to do on there, and they're similar with debtors. And again, with debtors, there's some issues in terms of the information provided to us, which then means that the samples that we've had to pick are very large. And if we can't clean the data that's been given to us, then it is just going to have to be a large sample set that we have to test. And working with James and Fazana, they both know that. And we're still looking to see what we can do on that. The other good news is that to date, we've only found immaterial misstatements in the accounts for 23-24. Got some presentational errors just on some of the notes. We're going through that with the accountants, and they know about those. So again, they're putting those through as we go along. There are some control deficiencies that we will report in our ISA 260 when we bring that to you in January. And then there are a couple of potential significant weaknesses for VFM, as EY noted, and it won't come as a surprise, it's the accounts preparation piece. But there's also the recoverability of investments, and again, talking through with Peter and Fazana in terms of how you've carried out those investments, the lack of kind of detailed agreements prior to this year and last year on investments that you had made. So again, clarity about governance and the monitoring of those investments is key and part of what we will be discussing. But overall, we have made good progress, and again, I don't want to take away from that. And given the disclaimed opinions for 21, 22, 22, 23, where we find ourselves in 23, 24 is that you have got more assurance over larger parts of your accounts than you have previously. And we have completed the VFM work just as EY have done in terms of 22, 23. So we will be reporting quite positively and gives us a really good basis to move forward into 24, 25. And we want to start our planning in 24, 25 in January 25 so that we are much closer to a normal timetable for local government audit, which allows us to do the audit in the summer of 25 to enable us to get an opinion out, which will be disclaimed, as I said. But again, it will be a disclaimed opinion because of technical issues, not because of the accounts per se. So yes, happy to take questions on that. Hopefully answered some of the queries. And obviously there is additional fees. And again, as part of the ISO 260 reporting, we'll detail the additional fees. We'll have discussed that with Peter and Fazana in detail in terms of what we've done, why we've had to do additional work, and who's done that and the grades, etc., to give you a full breakdown. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'll come to you in a moment, Councillor Williams. Just two very quick questions from me. The area that quite often concerns me in terms of the timelines is around where we're relying on external opinion and advice, i.e. sort of external either to your team or to Peter's kind of direct team. So thinking about that, is there anything more you can say? The ones that spring first to mind are around pensions and the valuation of the pensions, liability or asset, as it may be, and the valuation of investment property as well has been something that's needed to kind of go between lots and lots of different people before we can kind of get any assurance. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say on those two particular points, and then I'll open it up to questions from the committee.
On the pensions fund, we've done our own work, so we don't rely on the pension fund auditors. So we took a decision quite a while ago as a firm that as much as possible, we would not place reliance on other auditors and certainly not on pension fund auditors. Our own in-house pension centre of excellence team, who are actuaries and pension fund auditors who audit things like the BT pension fund, etc. They do that work for me as part of the SCDC audit. So I'm not waiting on the pension fund. On the investment properties, again, we've been going through that with Peter and Fazana in terms of all our valuation work, and that is part of the PPE work that we're still outstanding, Chair.
Thank you, that's helpful. Councillor Williams, you indicated.
Thank you. Two things, and I might have misheard, but it's sort of, I heard the word good news and then errors found. From our perspective, as auditors, you might find it good news you found errors, but I don't think from our perspective we would feel the same. So perhaps a rephrasing of words and opinions on that part. In relation to fees, Chair, this was possibly going to be more to our officers than external auditors, but part of changing the amount, the baseline amount, which has been changed in a considerable light, and I think we all had sympathy with the external auditors to a certain degree that the threshold and the bar was too low on that. To then hear extra fees again, despite already paying a whole lot more money in the first place, is definitely not good news in my ears. And it won't be something that I expect an answer from in this meeting, but if officers could pull together, I think we really need to know why that's coming into place, because at the end of the day, money spent on this is dead money. It's not providing the value for taxpayers. So we want, with all due respect, we want KPMG to have as little money as possible out of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm sure officers will be happy to take that away and provide an update either in between or at the next committee meeting on where we are with additional fees for this audit under consideration. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So one of the things that Andrew mentioned in his very concise summary, I have to say we rattled through that and it was very clear, but just one thing around investments, and you touched on investment properties, but I wonder if the comment on investments was a little broader than that. And could we just dwell on that for a second? I know we're going to come back and look at things in the new year, but just to round that out, you know, what was the scope of the comment on investments?
Yes, thank you. I believe you mentioned it was sort of the governance arrangement specifically around investments, I think was the comment.
Just to pick up on that. So when we think about the Ermine Street housing investment that was carried through, we were looking at that and we were looking at the agreement and the clarity of repayments, and we couldn't see that until recently. And again, that isn't a place that you need to be or want to be. So again, it's about making sure that that doesn't happen in the future. And when you do enter into an investment, you have that agreement in place from the start. In terms of related parties and inclusion in the accounts, again, of any kind of investments that you've made and companies that you have, again, as part of the conversation you just had with EY and Peter confirming that what would be included in the accounts for 23-24. Again, when we started those conversations, we weren't sure, and neither was the council in terms of what was going to be included in the accounts. Again, part of my recommendation will be about having that clarity from the start and making sure that in the future, when you do make investments and/or have companies and related investments, that those are clarified and everyone understands what the relationship is and how it should be accounted for.
Thank you. Is this on this point? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So on here, obviously things like Ermine Street was the first thing that the council did in relation, and it's wholly owned by the council. So there's a lot more control over that than if it was an investment into, you know, a public company or somewhere else. What would be really useful for the current situation, because you know, like everything, hindsight is a fantastic thing, and when you're starting things from fresh, but could we have some sort of skills audit to make sure that actually we either upskill if required to make sure that these are covered off? Because I think, you know, we are a local authority, we're not public investors. So perhaps if there's some more resources, I think that would be something productive from EY rather than just saying you should have done X, Y and Z. Let's look at what skill capacities we might need to give officers that are fulfilling those roles, because quite often they've come from other parts of the council. I think at one point someone from housing was there, and so not really used to that environment. I think that would be very helpful, Chair. Oh, and
okay.
Can I just seek some clarification, because a lot of these things you mentioned earlier about fixed assets. The fixed asset register seems to be the curse of most local authorities and has absolutely no cash impact whatsoever. It's just, like you say, lots of valuations. There was indications that there was going to be a steer away from looking at this. I'm just wondering if KPMG have got any comments on that.
Thank you. Just before we come to that, I'd like to just round off this particular issue around the investments. Councillor Stobart, did you want to ask any more about any of that? I've got some further questions.
No, just a brief reflection. I mean, this is it's a good topic. I mean, if we're thinking of the difference between audit and scrutiny, audit we're asking the question of how. So I think that was a useful discussion of, you know, how investments are presented, what information is available and included, and then I think scrutiny would be asking the question of what, you know, around investments and so on. So it plays that along with that theme. So that's really just a comment. And more acute information and clarity, you know, is required really for the scrutiny function, and that would be welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. Just for my own benefit, I haven't quite understood the assertion being made. So was it the case that when Ermine Street was first set up, there wasn't a documented and agreed set of repayments, and that subsequently and very recently such an agreement has been reached? Or is it the case that there was always an agreement, we just couldn't put our hands on it, and we've recently unearthed it, and now everyone's happy again? I couldn't quite tell from your comment which of those two it was.
Happy to clarify that. From our point of view, we didn't see any repayment schedule in place, and this is a £100 million investment, so we're talking a huge amount of money, and we didn't see an investment repayment plan in place from 14-15 when it was set up until 23-24. Which again, when councillors are talking about how do you make these investments and having the right skills, absolutely, you need the right skills. You do not enter into an investment for £100 million if you have not got the right skills. Have the right skills in place first before you enter into those kind of agreements.
Thank you for clarifying. I mean, my understanding, although it is somewhat predates my time, is that there was a fair degree of urgency in terms of changing government policy around I think that investment had to be made then or never in terms of what happened to those assets. Is my very, very brief understanding of it. I just want to bring in Mr. Maddock, and then I might come to you, Councillor Howell.
So I think it's probably fair to say we realised a little while ago, a couple of years ago, that we did need to do something around the governance in relation to Ermine Street. So we have engaged someone to draw up loan agreements and schedules. So I'll need to check where we are with that, because it's been quite a protracted process. We've also been undertaking a governance review of all of our subsidiaries. So we engaged an external consultant to look at the governance arrangements that we had. We haven't had the final report back, but I'm expecting there to be a number of recommendations in there, and some of them may well line up with the sort of things that Andy's referring to. I'll need to check what the route is for that. I don't know.
We can reflect on that.
Yeah, we probably need to reflect on, when we get the report, have a look at the report and review on what process that needs to come through for members, but it's certainly something members will need to see, because I'm pretty confident there will be some recommendations in there that we will need to act upon.
I mean, I would imagine, I would appreciate it coming through this committee, not that this committee wouldn't be able to enforce those or make the decisions on those recommendations, but it would, I think, assist the kind of overall level of understanding of the governance arrangements of these subsidiaries, which is clearly coming under increased scrutiny. Whether there's also, perhaps, as Councillor Stobart sort of pointed towards, whether this is also something that we need to pass to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as a kind of separate piece of work as well, is something else we can consider, because I think they have more resources and are more set up, for instance, to do kind of particular deep dives on issues that are identified. But I think at the least that report does need to come through this committee, if that can be arranged.
Yes, I think I would agree with that, and obviously Cabinet, being the executive, would need to see that and be fully cited on that. So, but we're hoping to get the report back in the next couple of weeks, and so we'll work out what the best route is for that and get that implemented as soon as possible.
Thank you. I'll look forward to that as an early Christmas present. Councillor Howell, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, since I'm the person who set up Ermine Street Housing and come up with a name and everything got to do with it, then I think that I should have my two penneth worth. I'm not going to go into everything, what all the decisions were made and why they were made at that particular time, because I don't know what I know until somebody asks me the questions. But if KPMG, or for that matter, anybody else wants to know why certain things were made at that time, in a history lesson, I'm more than happy to give them. But at the same time, whether or not there was put in place behind the scenes, I would not know that as much as why the decisions were actually made. I can just say this, as we've all know, are currently learning, that local government and government at all stages is a very, very fast-moving river. So I might be relying upon grey cells, but I might not be correct on some of the things I'd be saying. But I can at least give you a flavour as what's been happening in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. That offer is very much appreciated. And I think it is worth, as Councillor Williams pointed out, remembering that this is a wholly owned subsidiary at the end of the day, and therefore it has a different kind of character and nature than an investment in some other entity, and that is also understood. Are there any further comments on this particularly exciting topic, or indeed anything else that Mr. Cardoza raised? Councillor Leaming.
Thank you, Chair. It's not about investments, it's about the comment that you made about manual journals. I wanted to know how many manual journals roughly are there? What areas of the accounts do they relate to? Are they material, either in their own right or in aggregate? Thank you.
There are lots and lots of manual journals, Councillor. In terms of the actual number, no idea, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, that go through that we need to check. And part of our audit is to identify the ones that are high risk to us. So we have a high risk criteria application, and then we do a sample of those. The issue that we had in terms of the journals going through within the model that was producing your accounts was that we didn't have clarity about why they were going through or who was putting them through, and where there were adjustments to the face of the accounts. Again, having clarity and confirmation as to why those journals had been put through is something that we're still progressing with Fazana and James and Peter and the team. They are significant journals and a number, and there are a lot of journals that are going through on the face of the accounts that we need clarity and confirmation about.
So
does that help? Yeah.
So yeah, we are aware there is a manual journal, and it's sort of, we were thinking there wasn't going to be too much on it, but there was more and more added as time goes by. We need to, I think it's potentially something we should have posted to the ledger, because I think that would have made things a lot easier. I'm not entirely sure why it wasn't, so I think we need to have a discussion with officers just to make sure that in future we don't do this, because I think we would hold our hands up and say we probably haven't, we probably should have posted that journal earlier in the process. We have previously had manual journals as part of the process, but I don't think they've been as significant as this was, and I think the problem is the sheer number of entries. So I'll probably need to seek a bit more detail and clarification on that, but I think we would say that's a learning point for the team and something we wouldn't be doing going forward.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Did you have any further comments, questions?
Will we be hearing more about the progress about this in the next audit committee? I guess this will be
yes. Yeah, so
soon.
We're anticipating an additional meeting of the committee in sort of mid-Jan, 23rd of January. Ah, yes, it's on my piece of paper in front of me. If I could just read what was given to me, there we go. The 23rd of January. That was tentatively, I think, to have a kind of to have accounts and audit report by that point. Was my understanding. Is that still what we're aiming for, Mr. Manick, and indeed Mr. Cardoza?
So my understanding is that we've set a date of the 10th of January to get as far as we possibly can with the audit. That would then mean that we need to come back to the 23rd of January with a set of accounts that will then give time for Andy and his team to do all the last bits that they need to do ahead of the backstop date, which is the 28th of February. So 23rd of January is probably about the latest we could go with the meeting to make that possible. And as a result, we're having to cut off the audit at the 10th of January 2025. Again, I think we were hoping to get through everything. I think it's unlikely that we will get through everything, and Andrew mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
But I think we're all committed to get as far as we possibly can in the time we've got available to us, which is a little over a month, but obviously I'm acutely aware that Christmas falls within that, which is a bit of dead time. So
yeah, from our point of view, Chair, we are working, as Peter said, to the 10th of Jan to get as much of that work done. We've still got resources booked in, as I said. After that, we have to draw that line, and sadly, it is going to be a disclaimed opinion. But as I said, that then gives us the opportunity to then move into 24-25 on a much surer footing than we came into 23-24, and get back onto a normal timeline. If we delay any longer, we wouldn't be able to report to you for the 23rd of Jan with a more complete report and a fuller report that we will. And then it would also delay the kind of moving into 24, 25.
Thank you. So just to clarify your comment there, because you've referenced that it will obviously be a disclaimed opinion and it would have to be simply for the brought forwards, but are you also indicating there that the disclaimer may extend to the kind of in-year and final balances on some particular areas of accounts if you've not received sufficient, if not sufficient work has been done to receive assurance in those areas? Have I understood that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I think there was one more question that one of the councillors asked about the simplification of the accounts. That is something that's still ongoing and nobody has reached agreement on that. SIPFA are the ones now that have to make certain decisions as to what can be taken out of the accounts. We've not been given any indication of when that might happen.
Thank you. Sorry, I think that was in response to Councillor Williams' comments about sort of refocusing kind of auditor time and attention onto. Yes, well, I think it was particularly, so sort of away from sort of arcane and technical valuation towards things that were perhaps of more immediate relevance to end users of the accounts. Did you have another comment, or was it on that point?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just in relation to meeting dates. Obviously, we do have a date, but what we've done previously, if auditors or our officers need another fortnight, I think we'd rather give flexibility to the meeting date than have a meeting to be told it's not ready and then have it pushed back further. So just happy to offer that flexibility, Chair. And yes, I just think the fixed asset register, while it's important that we monitor and keep track and account for things, it doesn't impact on actually how we can spend money for residents in that sense. So a lot of us have been pushing for a long time to move audit away from that. So I'm hoping we'll see that coming through soon.
Thank you for that. Yes, I mean I think that data's been quite carefully constructed almost to give us the maximum possible time, sort of working backwards from the backstop date of the 28th of February. So, and that is already an additional meeting to the published calendar. But yes, we will hopefully have an update at sort of beginning of January, as you say, the audit kind of drawing to a close on the 10th. So we should know what we're expecting on the 23rd. Thank you. I'm going to suggest that we draw this sort of additional unagendaed item to a close. But thank you very much indeed, Mr. Cardoza, for attending today and providing that update. And I hope you and your team manage to get as much done as you can, obviously, between now and the 10th of January, in between having a festive Christmas as well. Sorry.
Thank you.
Chair, just for a governance point of view, I would actually like to strain that I think it falls under item 10, matters of topical interest.
Yes, it probably does.
As obviously we could get a lot of trouble for unagendaed items, but I do believe we should be clear that that is number 10 brought forward.
That's number 10 brought forward, quite so. Thank you. So returning to the agenda as printed, so we still have the governance, risk and control update and the Treasury Management Performance Report to come. We've been going for a little over an hour now. I'm happy to schedule in a few minutes comfort break if people want, or we can press on if people would rather. I'm very much open. I'm not seeing anybody jumping up and down too much, so let's press on. Item 8 is the governance, risk and control update. This is our regular report that we receive. Mr. Tully, could you please present this report?
Thank you, Chair. We're now back to page 343 of the agenda packs for the regular quarterly updates. The first thing to talk about is on page 346, just the audit assurance, concluding a couple of pieces of work that we've done as a team. Two pieces of work to report on. Firstly, grant assurance on disabled facilities grants. This is a review that we do every year, looking at how the grant is spent to make sure it complies with the regulations, and we provide that assurance back to the County Council as well as ourselves. That's the same level of assurance as the previous year, full assurance. So continued good practice there. The second one is the National Fraud Initiative, which we refer to as the acronym NFI. and that was a data quality piece of work where we provided full assurance too. So just way of background, every 2 years we extract data from a lot of our key systems. All councils do this, and we supply it to the Cabinet Office for the purpose of data matching. That should help detect potential cases of fraud error which are investigated at a later date. We're expecting the first results to be published later this month. The data extract is a complex, big piece of work, and there are penalties for late or poor quality data. So undertaking this work gives us a great opportunity to really comment upon the data quality of our systems and make sure that we're meeting the requirements of the NFI. We've been able to give full assurance on that, which is very good news indeed. Inevitably, being auditors, we always look for potential opportunities for improvement locally that we can make. So we've just gone back to stakeholders and made recommendations for improvements in that area. But overall, good news. Moving forwards on page 348 of the pack, just a couple of items there around continuous improvements for audit. One thing to bring to your attention, we've mentioned when we discussed the internal audit plan, how we follow up actions, and we're just reviewing our framework for doing that, just improving sort of like the way that we do it, automating a few procedures. That should hopefully make it just a little bit more efficient. And secondly, we've been consulting with our professional bodies on the latest versions of the global internal audit standards. The global internal audit standards have been issued, but we need local UK public sector versions. So it's just really been consulting with them on the latest guidance to make them relevant to us. The other thing that I would add, although I've not gotten the report, is that at the previous sort of meeting, the committee did request that the team follow up actions from the KPMG audit plan. And we've started that work already, working with Peter's team. Moving on to page 351, just news around fraud. Amongst the fraud statistics, a couple of things to highlight there. Firstly, it was Fraud Awareness Week, or International Fraud Awareness Week. So we've got some information about that, but more importantly, the next item you can see that we've done our own local campaign around that called Do the Right Thing. And we've got some information there just for the committee to be aware of the good work we've done. Some progress on identity checking software, which is good because we're trying to get that embedded as much as possible. And then finally, moving on to general updates, just a couple of things to be aware of there. Offlog, which we've mentioned before, there's just been a review of their long-term role, so we've just signposted you to that. And then just highlighted the latest CIPFA bulletin where they're talking about how to deal with the statement of accounts and the delays. So it's just to keep you sighted on those topical news. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tully. Are there any comments or questions on this update? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. So just two, one of which is on the final page with the useful links. The description of KPMG as our future externally appointed auditor, but given that they are now doing work, I'm wondering whether that probably should be a bit rephrased. And then also in relation to page 349, I can see that there is one referral received in relation to whistleblowing. And so whistleblowing was a task and finish group which I chaired with myself and Councillor Mason and Councillor Aidan van der Waar. And we did a lot of work on that policy along with other policies as part of the anti-bullying task and finish group. So I'm just wondering whether that was some time ago now. So it'd be really interesting to see if any of those changes and the reform policy helped to lead to this situation. And maybe we should, Chair, have a bit of an update on that, possibly in a briefing rather than public session around whistleblowing, because a big part of what we wanted to encourage was awareness, so people knew where to go. And I appreciate we now see one, but it's been naught for a while, and actually that's been a bit alarming because we are a big organisation, so you'd think there would be something coming through. I mean, fantastic if there's absolutely nothing, but it does seem a bit peculiar. So some more information around that scenario, but also the whole point of whistleblowing is that it's not identifiable to any people. So accept that probably should be a briefing rather than something in public session.
Thank you. Mr. Tully, do you want to comment on that?
Thank you, yes. Absolutely. I think we'll update the comment about KPMG for the next iteration of this report. That's an easy, quick fix. And around the whistleblowing, yes, we do periodically update our framework and look at our guidance around that. We're going actually through a review of that at the moment, so to inform sort of like future revisions of the policy. So I think, you know, that's absolutely fine to provide a briefing to the committee on how we're doing that and how we're progressing.
Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions on this item? Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. I was just looking at the progress, the experience, if you will, with checking identity documents, and then the user survey that followed. So it looks great. I mean, the numbers and the obvious success. I was concerned that the sample size for the feedback was quite small, and I wondered if this was the first step of accumulating feedback on the performance of the system. And this is really how a usability kind of set of usability criteria. So where are we headed with this kind of usability assessment? And what would your opinion be as to the usability of the system as a whole?
Great, so can I just bring in Mr. Maddock on something first, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Tully.
So I think it's fair to say we've struggled a little bit to get people to use the systems, but it's getting better as time goes by. I've used the system personally, and I've found it to be really user-friendly, really good. And I think the fact that we've got small sample sizes, that not as many people are using it as we would like. So we're still pushing that. So I think we would probably do another survey. We have renewed the contract for this because I think it doesn't really cost a lot, and it's quite a valuable tool to make sure people are who they say they are, and making sure the documents they provide are in fact real documents. So it is a good system, and I accept that, you know, we haven't got feedback from a lot of people. That's primarily because there are still others we believe should be making use of this. We're going to be carrying on that push to get this used. So yeah, I mean, it is. I think it's quite a good system, and certainly I've found it really, really helpful and quite intuitive as well. Sometimes these systems can be quite difficult to use.
Thank you. Mr. Tully, did you want to add anything to? No, I think we're there. Thank you. Anything from you, Councillor Stobart?
Just briefly, I did have to go through this experience with a university recently, and it involved a short Zoom session as well, just to check that you know, I was more or less who I said I was from my identity documents, but it was very smooth and efficient. So I think we're in that zone now, I think, with use of online facilities where we're used to logging on to Zoom and team sessions and so on. So I think we're set fair, but yeah, more usability data would be, I think, very welcome.
Thank you. Yes, if we can have, if we can keep track in future reports as to how much use there's been of the system, and hopefully we can see that kind of bedding in over time, I think that would be very. I think we'd find that particularly reassuring. I appreciate that sending questionnaires to people asking how you're getting on with stuff is quite often people don't have time or the inclination necessarily to respond. So I think perhaps as the kind of key metric, just the use of the system itself will probably give us an indication as to whether it's being accepted or not. Any further comments on this report? Sorry, Mr. Maddock.
Yeah, I thought we'd reported in here about 2 successful social housing fraud prosecutions that occurred in the period, but we haven't done. But we had 2 successful prosecutions where tenants were subletting when they shouldn't have been. There is information, I believe, on the website, because we obviously publicise these cases as a deterrent to others, because it is an area, as I think I've said before, that we've seen an increase in fraud and attempted fraud. And I believe we've got another couple of cases on the go as well. So again, if we're successful with those, we'll be advertising those or publicising those on the website.
Thank you. Perhaps as well, those could be included in the regular update to members sent by the Chief Executive, because that would be a good way to and through that kind of through down to communities as well, just to make sure that's as widely spread as possible. But that's it's not a good place to end up in, but it's the best it's the best we can do with it, I think. Thank you. So we've been asked to note this report, which we have done so. Thank you very much, Mr. Manick, Mr. Tully. We come to agenda item 9, which is the Treasury Management Performance Report for the second quarter of the year. Mr. Maddock to present this report. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is the Q2 monitoring report in relation to Treasury Management. It follows the sort of normal format that we follow. Under investment activity, it's interesting to note that at the start of the year, we were getting the best rates from banks and building society, and by the time we got through to September, we were getting the better rates from local authorities. So I think it's fair to say the interest rates that we're seeing being offered for our investments have been pretty volatile of late and don't necessarily follow the rates that have been set by the base rate that have been set by the Bank of England. So I just found it quite interesting that we've seen that switch, but we have seen an increase of 10 million in terms of our investments, and the same, most of that increase is because of either switching or additional money going into investments with other local authorities. And I think further on in the report, there's a list of the local authorities. We do make sure that those local authorities aren't on any list where they're in financial difficulty, so we do those checks along with our advisors ahead of making those investments. In relation to our borrowing, that has gone up by about 10 million in the intervening period. Part of that's HRA borrowing for our new house building projects. And there's been a little bit of short-term borrowing in relation to our general fund. Para 32, we have the normal table around our investment income and our interest payments. Unfortunately, interest rates haven't come down quite as quickly as we were thinking, and certainly the projections we were originally given haven't quite come to fruition. So we have been paying out a bit more in interest payments, but conversely, in relation to our investment income, we've benefited from additional income there. So the two need to be viewed together, and actually we've done rather better on our on our investment income than we have spent on our interest payments. So actually the overall position is quite positive in that respect. Is there anything else particularly to point out? Appendix A shows the local authorities that we've invested our 19 million with. And then there's the usual update from our Treasury Management Advisor at Appendix B. The only other thing to say is we are meeting with our Treasury Advisors next week, and I think members expressed a wish for a further training session. Might be worth clarifying exactly what members would like to get out of that, because the thinking was that I think we said we might like to get them to come along to a committee or something. Is that what we said?
Yes, we can. I'll open that up to the committee in a minute, and we can discuss exactly how we want to.
So hopefully on the March meeting we'll be able to organise something for then.
That would be good. Can I just to clarify a couple of things for me before I do open it out. So if I'm looking at the table at paragraph 32 on page 362 correctly, so if I'm reading that correctly, we'd budgeted that our investment activity would release about 4.5 million in cash that the authority could spend on other things, and in fact it's looking more like it's going to be 5.7 million. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's a good news story for this year. My other question was just around the additional loan to, I think, Ermine Street Housing, which, because I understand, because their loan facility has been 100 million, I think, since I started, but has now increased by 17 million. I wondered if there was some context we could provide to the committee around that.
Yeah, so Cabinet agreed some further lending in relation to, I'm trying to remember what it is. I don't think we refer to it in the report, so perhaps we probably should have done. Just checking whether we actually referred to, oh, here we go. No. So it doesn't say that it was agreed additional funding that the Cabinet made. I think it was probably back at when the budget was done back in February. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head exactly what the details behind that was, and I can't recall. So what I'd probably best do is come back with.
Yes, if you could just perhaps circulate to the committee, just by email before the next session, just some context around that. That would be.
I think it may have been to do with the Ukrainian refugees and providing some housing there. I think it was. Let me double check that rather than say something.
I think you are correct.
Yeah, I'll double check that.
Good. No, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Right. Comments from the committee, perhaps on the training and or on other things. Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with paragraph 32. What we have previously asked for, and this might need to be a restricted page for commercial sensitivity, but was to sort of be able to identify how each of our properties are doing, to make sure we're not in a situation where overall one is subsidising others and what have you. And that's something that we have had previously. And I think we do get to see things with the accounts, but given that that's, we are the accounts and we're catching up, which is great, there does seem to be that sort of gap in information. So that would be important because that would also help to advise us of what areas we should be expanding in and what areas haven't worked so well for us. Because we have to accept investments, whoever takes the decision in whatever field, they are risks. And some are going to work out well for us and better, and sometimes things aren't going to work. That's just the nature of the commercial world. But it'd be really good to see how each is performing. The other thing that I just wanted to raise was on page 359, paragraph 18. So two things on this. One about liquidity and making sure that we're compliant with our liquidity policy, because that is something in the past that has become a bit of an issue for us, and then we've had to do more short-term borrowing. And given what we're saying about where things are, it'd be good to know we're not going to not going to need that. And the other was we're understandably, because of the rates, investing a lot in UK local authorities. The national government obviously is doing a lot on local government reform. So some of the people that we're lending money to in the next year or so might not exist. So just wondering whether, and that's something actually when we have our treasury management, I'd probably say more like briefing than training from them, I think is what we want. So things like how, from their point of view, their professional point of view, how will the devolution deals and how will reorganisation of local government impact, and should we be taking into consideration certain areas of the country that we know are more vulnerable to it? There's going to be some risks attached, or what are the mechanisms going to be for us to still recoup our money? Because I know we can't go bankrupt, so in that case we're low risk, but equally with everything that's going on and some reallocations to make sure that we're not exposing ourselves to unknown risks at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, I think a briefing from them on how our investment advisors are making decisions on our behalf and how they are assessing the kind of market of opportunities, both on the investment and borrowing side, and just for us to kind of perhaps probe gently their kind of the assumptions that they're basing that decision making on, I think would be a good use of our time in March. Is this on this point?
Yes.
Yes, Councillor Sanford, thank you.
Just going to comment that Councillor Williams is opening a very broad topic there. It's quite possible that in 2 years' time, South Cambs District Council may have been reorganised. So how much contingency planning do we do? Rhetorical question.
If I may respond, it's just our district's money in other local authorities' hands. I appreciate we might not know ourselves, but equally at the moment we've got an obligation to safeguard the taxpayers of South Cambs money, which currently has been going to other local authorities. So perhaps that clarifies my point.
Thank you.
Understood, yes. Councillor Leamy.
Thank you, Chair. I just, sort of furthering on from Councillor Williams' comments, looking at page 363, there is a maturity structure of borrowing. And if I understand that correctly, all our local authority borrowing is under 2 years. I wanted to check that that actually was the case, because that, to an extent, mitigates the risk that Councillor Williams is speaking of. It would, but exactly. But it maybe we need to have a consideration of this as an investment policy, depending on what comes out in the news. But at least we know that our current investment structure, we have nothing with local authorities that's older than 2 years, if I'm reading that table correctly. Thank you.
Yeah, so on Appendix A, for example, you've got the 90 million, actually all of that's now been returned. So they were all short-term loans. You know, tends to be 6 months to a year generally with local authorities, but we have got the option to go longer if that seems appropriate.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions on this update? I'm not seeing anything, so we've been asked to review the Treasury Manager's Performance Report for Quarter 2, which we have done. Final agenda item is 10. We obviously took part of this earlier to bring in Mr. Cardozo at an appropriate point of view, at an appropriate point in the meeting, but do any members or officers have anything else that they would like to raise under this agenda item? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I know that we have obviously the employers' national insurance. It's looking like local authorities will be compensated for our staff, but whether there is potential to look at sort of whether there are knock-on effects when we bring people into the organisation. I'm just wondering if we've got some sort of evaluation of what that might cost us, or actually on the business impact. I just think from a governance point of view, we need to know if there's going to be any curveballs potentially that come out of that, and we've already seen some stats in relation to businesses and what have you, so just wondering if that's a piece of work, might be more relevant to go to another committee, but something that we should be alive to.
Thank you. Are you happy to take that away, Mr. Maddock?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because as you say, we're expected to get fully compensated. Whether we actually do or not is another matter. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. Obviously, we do business with organisations who are going to have to bear those additional costs, and potentially that will come through to us. Yeah, so there are. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Chair, if I can also say, things like how it affects our arm's length companies. So things like anybody that works from Urban Street, that technically is a private company, and I just think there are going to be hidden consequences, as it were, rather than, even if we are, like you say, it's not set in stone, but even if we are reimbursed, there's potentially going to have a financial knock-on effect to the local authority.
Thank you for that. Anything else as a matter of topical interest? Mr. Maddock.
So I think we might have some positive news on the independent member. I've been emailing someone and they are keen to become an independent member. Now, me, Jonathan, and hopefully Michael will be available. I don't know whether before Christmas, this is a bit optimistic, but I'm going to check out what we have to do, the processes, but it'd be good if we might be able to get him on board for the 23rd of January, but I might be being a bit premature there, but potentially. So this person I think I alluded to earlier, he was a former employee, but it's over 10 years ago, and he led what was then our fraud team. So I don't think I can say too much more than that, but I think he would bring good challenge in relation to fraud prevention and risk. He's got background in risk generally. But I don't know too much about him, so subject to the interview that perhaps we have with him, it'd be interesting to see. But he does seem quite keen, which is always good.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. Yes, we'll see what, as you say, there's not much time now between now and the end of the month, but we'll certainly see what we can do on that matter. Thank you. So, final reminder from me, so there will be an additional meeting of this committee on Thursday, the 23rd of January at 10 a.m. Here in the chamber, and then after that will be our regularly scheduled March meeting. So, it only leaves me to say I wish you all a happy Christmas and a happy New Year, and I will see you in January. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.